Hi, it's Gadget UK here again. As you can see, this time I'm looking at a Super Game Boy. It's not working very well, this. It starts up okay on the SNES, starts the game, whichever Game Boy game you put in here, but then just sort of freezes. So I'm going to take this apart, have a look inside, I think, just make sure the contacts are all clean on both cart connections there, and check the 3 electrolytic caps out on there. So I've used one of these game bit adapters here, the right size, to get the 4 screws out, and then there's just 2 Phillips screws holding the board in. Yeah, so the general condition is not too bad. The cart edge just needs a bit of a clean up there, I think. I'll probably do a similar thing with the Game Boy edge there. So yeah, it's looking in reasonably good condition. You can see the CIC chip here. I've got a Super Famicom here, so it's the Japanese variant, and this is a PAL lockout chip. So for the moment I've just been using this with one of the little pass-through adapters where you have a SAC cart on the side to provide it. It's a SIC chip, not CIC chip, and that's working fine. Whether that's actually caused me a problem, I don't know. Maybe there is a problem there. Maybe I do need to do a CIC mod to this, because what you can do is you can take, I can get a Japanese, just a cheap Japanese cart or something, perhaps a faulty one or something, take the CIC off that and stick it on here. As far as I understand, I could also do the CIC mod to my SNES as well, but I don't really want to do that, if I'm completely honest. These 3 caps might need swapping out at some point. It's probably a good idea anyway. It might even be those that's causing them the problem, I don't know. But as you can see, there's not much going on these. You've got the CPU here, which is, I think it's exactly the same as a standard Game Boy CPU. It might be a slightly different revision, I don't know, but I don't think it is. I think because it was a system on a chip anyway on the original DMG Game Boys. So that's your CPU. You've got some address decode and stuff in there, your sound hardware as well, and any graphics hardware is built into that as well. And you've got a couple of SRAMs here that give you 128K for the Game Boy. You've got your main ROM here, which is what the SNES boots. It's going to be mapped to the SNES address port there, or address and data lines initially. So when you boot this up, it boots the menu from here. The controls the Game Boy effectively, and then this little what looks like an I/O chip of some sort here. And I suspect what's going on here is this is going to be interfacing to the graphics side of the Game Boy. So the Game Boy's outputting. This is probably transferring that in some sort of parallel format, perhaps via DMA or something, to the SNES, to a certain area of memory, so that you can actually see the display. Because obviously, there's no LCD display on this, and that's the only chip on here that's different. You've got the standard Game Boy stuff. Those are standard Game Boy. That's your standard Game Boy CPU. You've got your CIC chip. You've got your SNES ROM. That has to be the bit that joins the Game Boy video out and sound output through to the SNES. So there's not much more to say about that, I guess, really. You can do another mod to this. I think these are somewhat like 2.5% faster than the original Game Boy was. From what I understand, you can lift a few pins, I don't know where it is, somewhere on this chip, I think, and wiring your own just over 4 megahertz, I think it's 4.147 or something like that, clock to get it 100%. So I might do that a later date, but for now I'm just going to clean this up. So as you can see, it's working here, but it's not working correct. It takes ages to boot, and there's no Game Boy sound. Just watch this. This is Gargoyle's Quest. Look how slow that is. It's like, instead of it being, 25 frames per second, it's like 0.01 frames per second or something. And there's no sound. I've actually let this intro run all the way through. Now you can see the way I'm doing this at the moment. I've got this tower here where I'm using the adapter to use a SAC, Japanese CIC. So my first thought was that something to do with it, but I don't think so, because the CIC is just a pass-through. I think there's something wrong with the actual the DMA side of this. I think it's trying to pull the sound across, and there's no sound being generated, and I think that's what's going on. I think the caps on here need swapping out. So yeah, I'm going to take it back to bits again, and I think I'm just going to put some miniature electrolytics in place of those SMDs. So as you can see here, I've got it working. It's very interesting. There's I've not had to do really anything to this. You know, I did swap out the caps. Just switch it off a sec. I did swap out the caps and tested the caps. Caps did need to be done. I could smell actually as I removed them a little bit of electrolyte there. You know, that fishy sort of smell you get. So they were on the way. Two of them actually measured okay, but one of them was a bit low. I think it was one of the 4.7s was measuring somewhere like 2.1 or something. It was very close. So anyway, it needed the new caps, so I put those on, but that didn't solve the problem. I then started to look at this adapter and the actual board. If I take the cart out, I'll show you the board again in a minute. You can see where I did the work on the caps and stuff, and I'll just point out what I'm just trying to explain here. But you see, you got the extra edge connectors here. Now, I've not looked at the pinouts of these, but I thought perhaps they weren't used, but then when I looked at the board and followed some of the traces, they are. One of them is used for the sound on one side. I think the sound connections go to this side, and then something else goes to one of the connections on the other side. So I started thinking, okay, well, we're getting no sound, and it's running like, you know, at 0.001 frames per second or something, because there's a reliance on those two connections. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So, you know, looking at this adapter I've got here, you know, the one I was using, there's no, you know, there's no pass through for those bottom, you know, those 4 pins. Well, it's actually eight pins on each side there. So then what I did is, just on the off chance, I dug out this. Now, I don't know if you saw this on my previous video here. I just assumed this was knackered. Now, I did some work, you know, cleaning this all up, soldering the connections and things inside. It's good as new inside, there's nothing wrong with it. But I couldn't get it working last time I tried it with, you know, a PAL cart and a Japanese SAT cart on the side. Now, I don't know why, you know, and I tried it extensively, it just wouldn't work. But with this actually works. If I plug my Super Game Boy into this Daytel thing and stick my Japanese SAT cart in the back, as you'll see, it's a bit of a towering monstrosity, it seriously is. I wouldn't like to wobble that around while it's on. There's probably a high risk of damage or something, but if I switch that on, you see it comes straight on. So yeah, it was a combination of those two things. The adapter I was using, like I say, wasn't you know, wasn't passing through the extended parts, you know, the extra 8 connections on each side. I'll show you the internals of the cart in a sec. I don't think that cart's booting actually. This is my EverDrive. Let me just give that another try. My EverDrive's not a particularly good fit in this Super Game Boy, but it does work, which hopefully I should be able to show you. Nope, it's not working again. There we go, it's working. Just a bit of a dirty connection, I think, on the Game Boy side there, so which is really good. You know, the main thing with this I'm really pleased with is I can use my EverDrive here to play some of the Game Boy games. You know, let's have a look, see what there is. Yeah, as you can see, it's working fine. Sweet. So you can see the work I've done there with the caps. 2 4.7s were swapped out, and I swapped the 22 for a 47. That one's just the main smoothing cap for this whole board, I guess. Basically, the supplies coming in here, I think, across these 2 pins. So you could swap that out for, you know, it's not, you don't have to put a 22 in there. You could put a 47 or a 100 microfarad or a 220 or whatever you've got, really. Anything above 22 is probably a good idea, and better than 22 is a good idea actually. 22 is a little bit low in my mind, although I'm sure it's probably sufficient. You can see the connections here that I was talking about. These 3 are not used. This one here is, I think it's coming up to one of these. It's hard to tell where it's going. It's coming to one of these caps here. Sound output, I think, one of the channels. And then there's a via there that goes through to the other side. And on the other side, you can see we're going to another one there. So I'm interested to see the pin out for this on the SNES card, but it's those 2 very edge pins there. I mean, this is 31, so it must be pin 31. And on this side, I think it's 62. Yeah, 62. So I'd be interested to, I'll have a look at that in a minute actually, just to see what those are, but that's where the sound seems to be routed. And then on this side, it's a similar story. You've got a connection here going to that resistor. The other pins aren't used. And on the other side, it's a similar thing. The very edge pin is used through a via, and the other 3 aren't. So yeah, there was the reliance there on those very edge connections on either side of the board, and that was why it was running with no sound, and it was running at like 0.1 frames per second or something. Very interesting. But yeah, that's all good now. So I'll reassemble it and have a play, I think, with this. I guess the other thing worth mentioning about this while I'm here is you can't play colour Game Boy games on these, as far as I understand. In fact, yeah, I'm pretty certain of that actually from various articles and things I've read. The sound is stereo, if you're interested. I did wonder, because the first few games I played I thought, I'm sure this sounds like it's in mono, but after putting headphones on I could hear the distinct differences, especially on Mario Land, certain instruments coming from certain channels and things, so that does confirm that this is actually outputting stereo, and we've just sort of seen that actually there just by just looking at the board. So yeah, I'll just get the lid back on this and yeah, have a play. So just closing up here, I thought I'd have a quick go of Parodius here just to see this thing in action, and just mention a few things quickly. Game Boy games are not region protected, so you can play any Game Boy games on this, apart from Game Boy Color games, as I mentioned previously. This is quite a cool game actually. It's very much like, I think it's done by the same people as Gradius and stuff. It just feels like a clone. I think it's the same people actually, they can only produce both. In Salamander, it's very similar to those games with the power-up system there on, but it's an awesome game. It's good on the NES as well actually, this. I think there's a Saturn version as well, I think, of some of these Salamander Gradius. They could be completely different games, but they just feel, certainly the power-up system and everything, they feel like that shit. I feel like they're being done by the same people. But as you can see, it works really well, it sounds great, it's really clear, stable picture. So this is definitely one of the best ways to play Game Boy games, I think. It's funny actually, what got me thinking about getting one of these actually, I think it was actually Ashton's. I watched one of Ashton's recent videos, and he covered the Game Boy and all this different sort of, a few different variations of it and some of the clones and things. And I think he covered this in that video. I'll put a link down below actually to Ashton's video so you can have a look at it. But yeah, that was it. Straight following that video, I was like straight on eBay. I thought, well, I've looked at this before and I've been put off, and I thought, do I really want one of these? But actually, since I got the EverDrive for the Game Boy and got the couple of Game Boys there, did a couple of repairs, got the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, I thought actually this would be a really good use of my SNES, especially with the clarity, both the picture and stuff. And this is a really good way, like I say, of playing Game Boy games. It's really sweet. Down. I think there's another variation of this cart actually. You can get Super Game Boy 2. I think, if memory serves, the only difference, there could be a difference, post in the comments below if I've missed something, but I think the only difference as far as I'm aware, there's a connection port on it, so you can link up a second player, but you can actually mod this. If you just have a look at the schematics actually for the original Game Boy, the MG01, you should be able to work out which connections on the CPU there to connect externally. You might need a transistor or something somewhere, certainly a couple of caps or something, or a resistor, but you can pretty much wire a port on there. I guess I could do that with, if I've got a spare Game Boy Color, I could take the ports off there and mount it internally in this cart, but I'm never going to use that, but it's just worth pointing out that if you wanted to connect one of these up to an actual Game Boy via the loop cable there, it is possible. And I guess you could do stereo, like a stereo audio outline out mod as well. I think that's probable. Yeah, it will be possible because the two channels there, you've seen where the two 4.7 mic caps go. You could actually, connect some connections up there. Maybe a couple of transistors or some 2N3904s or something to amplify the sound or something, and have a line out. That's entirely possible. But anyway, I thought you'd find this interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.